It's easy to get stuck reaching for the same familiar fruits and vegetables, even when you know a colorful variety is key. Balance of Nature's fruits and veggie supplements don't replace fruits and vegetables, but it makes it easy to add more variety to what you already eat. With 31 ingredients that are whole fruits and vegetables, switching it up is easy because we've already taken care of the hard part. Go to balanceofnature.com and get a free fiber and spice supplement, plus 35% off your first set as a new preferred customer by using discount code POD.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Well, there's no denying it. It was a tough night for Republicans across the country. But as expected, radical socialist Zohran Mamdani relatively easily won his election for mayor of New York City. Disgraced former Governor Andrew Cuomo was ultimately unsuccessful in upending Mamdani. I think the story was written in the Democrat primary, in all honesty, and the substantial demographic changes in New York City since the days when Rudy Giuliani was elected mayor manifested themselves last night. Now, some Republicans, including President Trump at the very last minute, to my surprise, rallied around Cuomo as the only hope of stopping Mamdani's reign of terror in New York City. I never agreed with that political calculus. The idea that if Republican candidate Curtis Lee, who won the Republican primary and headed a ticket of city council candidates and civil court judge candidates, had dropped out of the race, the idea that all of his votes would have redistributed to Cuomo is simply untrue, particularly given the fact that he was the Republican nominee and was maintaining most of the Republican base. These are people who historically have some animosity for Cuomo, particularly after Cuomo said that if you believed you needed to own a gun or you didn't support the right to an abortion, there was no place for you in New York State. Looking at this as a professional, one observation I would make is that polling has become even more unreliable in the age of mass communications, in the age of the internet. When I began working on political campaigns 100 years ago, all polling was done on hardline home phones. Before that, Gallup and Harris, who were the leading pollsters in the country, actually conducted their polls on a door-to-door basis, finding voters who they checked against the voter rules. Then they moved, of course, to telephone polling using the phones that were in people's homes or businesses. And of course, today, with the rise of the cell phone and internet polling, and the fact that in this atmosphere, many voters, both left and right, don't want their opinions to be known because they don't want to be targeted and abused, I think polling has become far more volatile. So keep this in mind and take a grain of salt whenever you look at all of the polling going into any of these races. Polling is a snapshot in time. It is technically outdated by the time it's tabulated and reported. That's because the volatility of the voters, but also look at the sample size and also take a look at the track record of the pollster, whoever that may be. Republicans lost the governorship in New Jersey and Virginia by double digits. This really is not surprising. Both of those states are reliably blue states. They have trended blue. Both of them were swing states. New Jersey was always a swing state. Gerald Ford carried it in 1976 over Jimmy Carter. Reagan carried it in 1980. And of course, in 1984, George Bush carried it in 1988. But after that, it began to shift Democratic, and it had substantial changes in its demographics as well. I think that the fact that Jack Ciattarelli, who I think waged a valiant fight, came so close in the governor's race last time was really due to the unique time of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as you may remember, one of Phil Murphy's top aides mistakenly blurted out that after the election he would put in place even more draconian COVID-19 lockdowns. An event like that can skew a race, particularly at the last minute, and I think it explains the close finish that Chitterelli had last time, which I think raised the expectation levels that he might be able to win this time. I do think he put on a spirited campaign. I thought he bested his opponent, Mikey Sherrill, in the one debate that I watched. It's kind of amazing to me that Mikey Sherrill, as a member of the House of Representatives, engaged in 3 different stock transactions in which she tripled her net worth for a net gain of about $7 million. And she paid a fine for this, I believe. She was a member of the House Defense Appropriations Committee. But when she was confronted with all this, she said that she couldn't remember. I thought that was a key moment in the debate. I thought that it might be a turning point, but I was incorrect about that. Also, Virginia had been a red state only after the surprising victory of Glenn Youngkin. In Virginia, by the way, the governor is allowed by Constitution to serve but 1 term. And now Virginia's gone back to the trend of turning blue. You want to know how blue Virginia is? Well, you can run for attorney general there. You can get caught threatening to shoot your opponent in the head and kill all the members of his family, as Democrat candidate Jay Jones did, and you can still win. So anybody who says this was a referendum on Trump or this was a referendum on Trump's policies, I've seen this movie before. Had Republicans won one or either of those seats, Republicans would be saying that this was a referendum on Trump, but because the president, as is tradition and historical, both of these Democrat states went Democrat, I don't believe it is a measure on how Trump is doing. It's also worth noting that neither Earl Sears or Jack Chitterelli were MAGA Republicans. Both had in the past made public comments critical of President Trump, with Earl Sears demanding that President Trump remove himself from politics after the 2024 election that he ended up winning. So the public didn't reject MAGA on Tuesday. They rejected mainstream Republican politics, perhaps. Republicans need to put forward candidates who will win over disaffected independent voters. They need political figures who authentically embody the MAGA spirit. I would point out that in all of his races for president, in the urban areas of states like Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and Ohio, Donald Trump has always consistently been able to reach candidates that Mitt Romney and John McCain were never able to reach, and that was the margin of difference in the 2 races he won. Let's put the 2020 race aside because I think there are still reasonable questions about the anomalies and irregularities in that particular race. If those kind of candidates, though, Republicans who are rhinos, who don't support Donald Trump's pro-growth, pro-law and order, low tax, pro-tariff policies are on the ballot, I think we will lose again. So yesterday's election will be a dark omen for the establishment Republicans, but I don't think it tells us anything about who will win the 26th election. Again, in politics, a week is a lifetime. While we're at it, let's dispense of one other very common theory, and that is the theory that somehow if Curtis Sliwa, the Republican nominee, had dropped out, that all of his votes would have gone to Andrew Cuomo, who would have then have beaten Zohran Mamdani. Once again, as a professional, I've never seen any empirical evidence or any polling that supported that theory. It is true that some of those votes would have moved to Cuomo, but certainly not all of them. And most of the surveys I saw showed that in a 2-way race, Governor Cuomo, because he was carrying very high negatives, probably would have lost anyway. I do think there is a silver lining for Republicans in New York State. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who is one of President Trump's most vocal supporters in the U.S. House, is expected to announce her run for governor of New York any day now. One of Stefanik's top allies, GOP Councilwoman Ina Varinkova, said, "We have a governor's race coming up, and I think we can win that race, especially if Mamdani is the mayor. I'm going to be working my butt off," she said, "to make sure that if it's Elise Stefanik, she wins." She's supposed to announce right after the mayoral election. I think that there's a pathway for her to win the governorship, and I think that we can change a lot if she's governor. I could not agree more with that analysis. I must tell you, in the over 50 years that I have worked on political campaigns, and in the literally thousands of pages of polling that I have studied and crosstabs of polling that I have studied, I've never seen a candidate with a higher unfavorable rating and a lower job approval rating than Governor Kathy Hochul. My great fear, if I were Elise Stefanik and the Republicans, would be that a candidate as yet to emerge beats Hochul in the Democrat primary. It didn't go without being noticed that Hochul endorsed Mamdani, but Mamdani refused in the debate to endorse Hochul. That's proof that Hochul, like Chuck Schumer, who said yesterday that he voted but wouldn't say who he voted for, refused to say he voted for the Democrat nominee, fear the rise of power in the party's most progressive and radical socialist wing. So the silver lining, if there is one, and I feel badly for my many friends who live in New York City, is that it will make it, I think, possible for a strong Republican like Elise Stefanik to get elected. The Emerson College poll, which is a very credible poll, only has her trailing Hochul today by 5 points. That's an extraordinary finding. So if the socialist schemes laid out by Mamdani are actually enacted, if he in fact raises taxes on, as he put it, white people, if he defunds the police, which is something he tried to get away from during the campaign, but Elon Musk posted a brilliant kind of composite of all the many times Mamdani said he would do that. If indeed he opens Rikers Island and lets all of the inmates out, because he said the only purpose for incarceration of dangerous criminals is to please their victims. If he tries to grab and control the grocery stores so that they are state-run, if he insists on giving free everything to anyone, but raises taxes on the working families and the businesses of New York, the results of that in New York City are going to reverberate throughout New York State, particularly in the suburbs. So New York may be at that moment. We've seen it before when George Pataki beat Mario Cuomo. We saw it in New Jersey when Chris Christie, who ran as a reform candidate, beat the Democrat incumbent there. These northeastern blue states have a saturation point. When taxes get so high, when crime gets so bad, when the quality of life descends to the point that it transcends partisan politics. Democrats still control the state and have an enormous voter registration edge. But I think if Mamdani is elected, he's made it clear that he's deadly serious about enacting his agenda. This will result in the wealthy and those in the middle class fleeing New York City. Tax revenues will drop, businesses will shutter. I think crime will spike, and there are all kinds of unforeseen negative consequences yet to be determined. The voters who got duped will be running back to the Republican Party for some shred of normalcy outside of New York City. Stefanik could be the perfect candidate to hold the banner as someone who's undoubtedly MAGA, but also has the right temperament to win over moderates and disaffected Democrats. As the Lord tells us, sometimes we need to go through trials and tribulations in order to wake up and see the light. Mamdani will certainly provide many trials, but the rise of Elise Stefanik, which I predict here and now, could help mitigate this damage and keep New York City from falling into complete ruin. If you understand how New York City is funded, you understand that the governor has an enormous influence on New York City. It has been traditional for New York governors to fight with the New York mayors. Nelson Rockefeller fought with John Lindsay. Mario Cuomo fought with Mayor Ed Koch. That has always been a natural tension. But it's very clear that Kathy Hochul will not put the brakes on the radical agenda of Mamdani. Indeed, she will embrace it in an effort to save herself in her own Democrat primary. I've been watching Empire State politics for, over 50 years. Once lived in Lewisboro, New York, and was a member of the Lewisboro, New York Republican Town Committee. Those days, up the northern part of Westchester was a heavily Republican area. That is no longer the case. But New York State is one of the few states where your name can appear on the ballot in multiple places and you get the cumulative vote. And I think Mamdani essentially gave the finger to the Democrat Party yesterday when he announced that he had voted for himself, not as a Democrat, but on the radical socialist left working families line. Take that, Democrats. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we'll be right back with more Hot Politics.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, after the election losses of yesterday, President Trump addressed the nation this morning, urging Republican senators to get rid of the filibuster in order to reopen the government as soon as possible. The filibuster would essentially lower the number of votes required to pass the continuing resolution as proposed by Republicans that would continue to fund the government at current levels. The Democrats, you will recall, under Chuck Schumer, demanding $1.5 trillion in new spending. But the president conceded now that this is beginning for the first time to appear to be a negative factor for Republicans. Actually, the polling I've seen indicates that it is a negative factor for both parties, that people are disgusted with government, politics, and politicians. But we're in the midst of this disastrous Democrat-created government shutdown. I think it's officially now the longest shutdown in government history. It's clear the Democrats are like kamikaze pilots who will take the country down. When we come back, I want to talk about Zohran Mamdani's victory night speech. He quoted the socialist Eugene V. Debs. I was a little surprised. I thought he might have quoted Joseph Stalin. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks, where we talk politics and we bring you the inside skinny on politics.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Mayor-elect of New York City, as I predicted consistently on this program. And in his victory speech last night, rather than being conciliatory, he essentially reiterated many of the socialist messages that he espoused on the campaign trail. The one that stuck out to me is when he said, we chose hope together, hope over tyranny, hope over big money and small ideas. Let's stop right there. As the investigative reporter Sam Antar has more than proven, Mamdani's election was not fueled by small donors and some kind of grassroots uprising, although New York City does have an 8-to-1 campaign finance matching program. Mamdani's election was financed by a very intricate series of 501c3 nonprofit organizations, 501c4s, NGOs. These are charitable organizations, theoretically, working in tandem with political parties like the Working Families Party. I think in flagrant violation, by the way, of the IRS regulations and their tax statuses. But the idea that Mamdani's election was fueled by small donors and average people is simply not true. Mamdani reiterated his plans to freeze the rent for all rent-stabilized apartments, which, of course, will make it impossible for landlords to make improvements, to do upgrades, or in the end, to actually make any profit, in which case they'll probably take those apartments off the market, make buses faster and free. I wonder who's going to pay for that. And deliver universal child care now that he's in office. He didn't mention his plans to defund the police, but he's certainly said it enough times. And of course, New York is already suffering from the cashless bail system that was put into place by none other than, well, Governor Andrew Cuomo. He promised essentially a totalitarian nanny-state bureaucracy that would be involved in the lives of all New York City residents. Mamdani said last night, this new age will be defined by a competence and a compassion that have too long been placed at odds with one another, and we will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about. What he doesn't seem to understand is in many cases government is the problem, not the solution. I still think that he benefited greatly from the hope and change phenomena. I think many younger voters were attracted to the insurgent theme of his campaign and the idea that they were a part of history without really focusing on the impact of the policies that he was putting forward for New York. The great political humorist of the 20th century, H.L. Mencken, once said that democracy is the theory that the common people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard. I kind of feel that way. I feel badly for my friends who live in New York City, but those Democrats who voted for these policies, I think are going to be surprised with what they get. And I do think by 2028, if New York City is, as I think it will be, the flaming wreck that it will be based on the soft on crime, high tax, redistributionist policies of Mamdani, it will be a showcase for voters across the country of what happens when you actually choose communism. The people of New York City will certainly be getting it good and hard for the next couple of years, in my view. New York's City Commissioner Robert Tucker has submitted his resignation following the election of Zohran Mamdani for New York City mayor. Tucker, who is Jewish, is not willing to work for a boss who has vehemently expressed his opposition to the state of Israel. Fire Commissioner Tucker said, "It's been an honor of a lifetime to serve as the 35th City Fire Commissioner." He thanked Mayor Eric Adams for his trust and confidence in doing this job. We empowered the brave men and women who keep our city safe, bringing fire-related deaths to a historic low. I will leave this crucial role on December 19, 2025. Between now and then, I will continue to lead the greatest fire department in the world, and I will ensure an orderly transition. We salute the fire commissioner, Robert Tucker, for his public service. Tucker's resignation is not an overreaction, in my opinion. Mamdani has defended the use of anti-Semitic, genocidal, globalized the Intifada sentiment that endorsing wiping Jews out of the Holy Land. It was very disturbing that he also campaigned with Iman Siraj Wahaj, who was named as an unindicted co-conspirator of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing that was, of course, a precursor to the September 11 attacks. Expect more of the same. I think competent and rational people will lead positions of authority within New York City government in the weeks to come. They'll be replaced by Islamists, socialists, cronies, and other jihadis. New York City may have a situation that's even worse than Portland on their hands before it's long, as the inmates run the asylum. It would be nice if there were a Rudy Giuliani figure who could lead New York City out of perdition after Mamdani, but I think the demographic changes in New York City make it extraordinarily difficult for that to happen. I pray for my friends who live in the Big Apple. Meanwhile, voters in California passed the congressional redistricting plan of Governor Gavin Newsom. California used to have an independent, nonpartisan congressional redistricting commission that had worked very well for decades. But now Gavin Newsom has grabbed control of that process in an effort to add 5 new House seats, which would be held by Democrats, to that state's redistricting. President Donald Trump is preparing an executive order to deal with election fraud in California as their mail-in voting system is besieged by accusations of fraud after yesterday. On Tuesday, California voted to approve Proposition 50. This is a measure that ends the state's independent redistricting commission, and as I say, will allow Gavin Newsom to gerrymander congressional districts for the intent of removing seats of Republicans. President Trump believes this result was fraudulent. In a Truth Social post, he wrote, "The unconstitutional redistricting vote in California is a giant scam in that the entire process, including the voting itself, was rigged. All mail-in ballots where the Republicans in the state are shut out is under very serious legal and criminal review." Remember, California has this odd jungle primary system in which all candidates of all parties run in one election. So the two top vote getters run off against each other. Those can often be 2 Democrats. On the other hand, Katie Porter, I don't know if you've seen her. She's another one with those wild eyes like AOC. Katie Porter is thought to be the front runner for governor. She actually said that on election night when Donald Trump was elected president, her daughter cried because she was afraid that she would become pregnant and need an abortion and not be able to get one. This is really astounding to come out of the mouth of any politician. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, she's a Spitfire, elaborated on President Trump's comments, saying the White House is working on an executive order to strengthen elections in this country and to ensure that there cannot be blatant fraud, as we saw in California with their universal mail-in voting system. Leavitt also stated that fraudulent ballots are being mailed in the names of other people, in the names of illegal aliens who shouldn't be voting in American elections, and so on. It's interesting to me that Attorney General Bill Barr, in an interview on CNN, actually said to Wolf Blitzer, I believe it was, that mail-in ballots were an open invitation for voter fraud. He said that as Attorney General, but later, when shown hard evidence of mail-in ballot voter fraud in the state of Pennsylvania, he told the U.S. Attorney in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh to ignore that evidence and not to pursue those matters. President Trump really does need to crack down on voter fraud before 2026 midterm elections. The entire early voting, mail-in voting needs to be replaced with paper ballots and an election that takes place on one day, not over 3 weeks. Democrats have shown this propensity to cheat. They love mail-in ballots and absentee ballots because it opens up countless avenues for fraud. When I was in Nevada before the last presidential election, giving a speech out there, a man approached me and he had 5 ballots all sent to the same address, but to 5 different people, 5 different names. Only one of those was his name. The other 4 were people who had rented his apartment prior to his renting it. I asked him what he was going to do about this. He said, well, first of all, I'm going to vote in person because I'm not even sure if I mail in this ballot that it will be counted. But when I did some basic research on the other 4 people who got absentee or mail-in ballots at my address, 2 of them were dead, one of them who had moved out of state, and the 4th one still lives in Nevada but had a ballot sent to him at an alternative address. This is precisely the kind of anomaly and irregularity that we have to clean up in our election systems if we are to have any chance of maintaining a MAGA majority. The Democrats love mail-in ballots and absentee ballots. As I say, they hate mandatory voter ID laws, however, because they fear that that will prevent illegals, criminal felons, and other core parts of their constituency from being able to vote. California is their oyster because it's a state run by far-left lunatics with a malignant narcissist as governor, Gavin Newsom. This guy's got great hair, but that's about all you can say about him. He is, of course, from one of the wealthiest families in the country, but he tries very hard to come across as a common man, which, frankly, I don't think he pulls off. This guy will say and do anything to promote his national profile with a clear presidential run in mind for 2028. President Trump actually needs to impose election integrity on California and the entire country until the vote can be secured, results cannot be trusted, and democracy will be illegitimate in the country. I point out that the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is now heading a task force to study the integrity and the history of electronic voting machines. I think this is a vitally important investigation, and we need to get answers, not theories, not supposition, not charges, not claims, but hard evidence to determine once and for all whether these electronic voting machines can, in fact, be manipulated both within the system or from outside. We were told repeatedly that they were not connected to the internet, yet in multiple states it has proven that they were. So we need to go back to good old-fashioned paper ballots in an election on one day, and yes, voter ID, meaning photo ID, in order to be able to vote. Since the government is committed to real ID, and a real ID can only be given to a U.S. citizen, although I'm not a big fan of the real ID program, because I don't particularly like the government having a database on every American citizen, still, I would be satisfied with checking real ID against the voter list to determine that those who are voting are actually legally eligible to vote. Till we clean up our election system, our elections will always be in doubt. And this leaves me some sleepless nights. I believe that there is still a solid majority out there from the country for Donald Trump and the coalition he built with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And when we come back, we're going to talk about RFK's latest program calling for mercury to be banned from all vaccinations throughout the world. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone. Here we talk politics, history, news, and I try to give you the inside analysis based on 50 years in the corroded rectum of the two-party system. I'm a veteran of over 13 national presidential campaigns and over 700 campaigns at all levels. If you cut me, I think I would bleed politics. I eat, sleep, and breathe politics. It is my passion, and I try to bring you the nonpartisan, unvarnished opinion right here on the Stone Zone. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is, of course, the son of New York U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who was brutally assassinated on the eve of his greatest political triumph when he won the 1968 California Democrat primary, is calling for mercury to be removed from vaccinations throughout the world, following the example from the United States. RFK Jr. said this while appearing on a video feed at the Minamata Convention on Mercury in Geneva, Switzerland. He explained the importance of the convention and how, although mercury was removed from over-the-counter products here in the United States and across the world, it somehow incomprehensibly remained in vaccinations. So those who have for years said that RFK's anti-vaccination are incorrect, what he's opposed to is some of the dangerous and toxic ingredients in vaccinations. What he is now essentially given scientific proof of their danger and toxicity. So we have to ask why. Why do we have this double standard for mercury? Why do we call it dangerous in batteries? We call it dangerous in over-the-counter medications and makeup, but we find it acceptable in vaccinations and dental fillings. Why indeed? Thimerosol's own label requires it to be treated as a hazardous material and warns against ingestion. There's not a single study that proves that mercury is safe. That's why in July of this year, the United States closed the final chapter on the use of thimerosal, which is mercury, as a vaccine preventative, something that RFK says correctly should have happened years ago. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has worked diligently to create common sense rules regarding vaccinations. No longer does the federal government deny that there can be significant health risks in taking a vaccination. This must be a matter of personal choice. No longer does the federal government work with Big Pharma to coerce people into taking vaccinations against their will. The people of America, once again, will have the freedom to choose, and the people across the country should have the same rights. They should not be compelled to take a vaccination with harmful mercury in it, and they certainly should not be forced to inject their children with a vaccination that may harm their children's cognitive functions. Hopefully, more countries throughout the world will follow America's example as set by the Trump administration and the incredible work being done by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Meanwhile, U.S. Steel has announced a $14 billion investment partnering with Nippon Steel of Japan that will bring in over 100,000 additional jobs to America. This is the result, of course, with President Donald Trump's recent meeting in Japan with the newly elected Japanese Prime Minister. She, of course, was elected in the upset within their parliament in which the Conservative Party joined with a small Libertarian Party to create a new pro-Western, pro-United States, pro-Trump majority. This, I think, shows how President Trump's policies are revitalizing America's moribund industrial base. U.S. Steel plans to invest $11 billion into growth by the end of 2028, believing that they, working with Nippon Steel, can create $3 billion in new value. They will be focusing on creating a more productive, effective sector that will make U.S. Steel into the greatest the world has ever known. Donald Trump understands when it comes to 2026, while he has an enviable role of creating peace around the world, and I still argue that it is he who deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, it is still the economy stupid. And those who keep, as Chicken Little, screaming about the 2026 elections based on yesterday's results, I say yet again, until we know what the rate of inflation is, until we know what the state of the economy is, until we know what the unemployment rate is, until we know what the interest rates are in 2026, it is impossible to say what will happen. But I predict today that there will be an increase in the Republican margins in both the House and Senate when the smoke clears in 2026. You heard it here first on the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. Until we meet again, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.